My name is Anita Magnus Frank. I'm a Holocaust survivor, and I survived the war as a child in hiding. I lived under a false name. I lived with constant fear, and I learned to hide my Jewishness and keep on hiding that for years to come.
Yoav, I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind. Uh, you're fairly well known, at least to me, as a director of a movie a number of years ago called Crime After Crime, which sort of set the pace where you deal with, or your study is of people who have been massively abused by the system. And of course, you've won a number of awards, the Robert F. Kennedy Award for that. Uh, So your documentaries appear to center on individuals such as in the crime after crime, and also on Anita, who suffered this terrible injustices. And so, what led you to meeting with Anita?
I think I am drawn to stories of people who have had a rough go of it in one way or another. People whose stories are untold, but who have suffered, whether it's injustice or actual abuse or war, what have you. I think my heart just goes out to people who are suffering, and especially those who, despite their suffering, find a way to hold their heads up high, I should say, and to find a way out on some level, or who are on a mission to get out. So in Crime After Crime, that film was about a victim of really horrible physical abuse and emotional control and sexual violence who was wrongfully incarcerated for the murder of her abuser, and who was now, along with two lawyers working for her, uh, trying to find a way out of prison, and also was a real model individual in terms of how she was leading her life within the prison. Just one example is that she was leading the gospel choir inside the prison. Um, so then, with a story like Anita's, she's someone who suffered tremendously, both probably more so psychologically, but lived with a kind of fear that really her very life could disappear if she uttered one wrong word at the wrong time to the wrong person. And that really is the great big secret that she was carrying as a child. And then with the film, I tried to capture her journey in finally being able to reveal that secret and own her story. And it took many, many decades for that to happen for her and also for most of the hidden children.
Anita, again, I say it's a real opportunity to speak to you. I would like to get a sense of uh, the film was, you grew up in the Netherlands, right?
Yes.
And what I find most interesting about it is you started a whole new life, but it was amazing how you had the strength to tell this incredible story of the events. How did you do this? And then of course the follow-up question is, how did you get in touch with Yoav to make a production? This is really something worth listening to.
I have no responsibility for Yoav because he he came to the house one day, and it was thanks to the Holocaust Center that this all occurred. So I was asked if I would participate in this project, and one day there, Yoav came with his camera, and that's how come that I was involved. And I have been doing a lot of talking since I joined the San Francisco Holocaust Center at the Speakers Bureau there. And, uh, you know, I didn't for years and years and years and years. Nobody ever talked about the Holocaust. And it was sort of a miracle to have it finally recognized when finally the Holocaust Museum was created. And uh, PBS, no, I'm not sure it was PBS, but anyway, it was a television program about the Holocaust that people began to talk about it because silence reigned for the first 30 years and nobody talked about it. And for me, being a child was, and experiencing it as a child. I was 6 when I went into hiding, and 8 when we were reunited. And I was fortunate my parents survived. But so I did not have the horrific memories that the older ones who understood what was happening. I only knew that I, as a child, that if I told anybody or anybody would find out I was Jewish, that was a great big secret. If anybody would find out if I made one wrong step, I would die. So that's what I lived with for those 2 years. Um, but it was not the adult realization like Edith Eger. I mean, a good example is Edith Eger, who survived Auschwitz, a Hungarian Holocaust survivor, who never talked about it, and it destroyed her. So for me, being very a sort of open, noisy, social kind of person, when the opportunities arrived by the Holocaust Center asking me to talk about it, that opened up then the opportunity to talk about it. And when the San Francisco Center, with their Speakers Bureau, invited me to do so, I just felt it was an incredibly important thing to do.
The tragedy is that Holland had become much more anti-Semitic after the war. There was a commission that determined who would live in what house. My mother, she found a beautiful house. The commission said, you can have it. And then at the last minute, it was taken away. And the response was, those damn Jews, they want so much again. We stayed hidden in a crazy way because the anti-Semitism had spread.
My knowledge of course, comes from my mother-in-law, may she rest in peace. But like many people, and where you're different is she really didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
And I guess you've seen that with a lot of your, friends and all the same way.
My sister, I am the oldest of 3 girls. I had an older brother, but he died. My middle sister just cannot talk about it. My youngest sister, who was only 4 and doesn't really have a lot of memories, she talks about it. She lives in Roanoke, Virginia, and a movie has been made, including her too, about Holocaust survivors. Yeah, for my middle sister, she gets too depressed. It is too overwhelming. For me, because I'm more academically sort of focused, it is a vital story that should always be talked about because it is a lesson for humanity.
My children are known as 3G, and my grandson is a 4G. And
Yes.
the key is for them to be able to pass it on to the 5G and the 6G, which hope happens in my family. So I admire that. I have one really question about uh, the post-war period. I was somewhat shocked to hear that, the country, the Netherlands, is known to be so open-minded and all. And maybe you can tell you had to leave, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, this gets to one of the core issues of my talk, and that is the horror of, we live in a world where we are applauded for following rules, for listening to authority. And what part of my story is the utter horror that we and particularly in the way we raise our children, that we focus on the word, for example, obedience, and words like loyalty and adherence. And we are hearing that left and right, that you have to agree with those in power. You You can't argue with them. You have to follow them blindly. There is nothing more dangerous than that. That it is so vital that every single one of us learns to think for him or herself. And that the blind following of people in power, particularly when it involves the destruction of innocent people, like what's happening in today's world, innocent people, that we need to not focus on loyalty and following rules, but we need to keep on thinking for ourselves and developing a moral compass that commits us to be thoughtful and connected to, quote, the others, that there are no others. They're just us human beings. So that's for me at the heart and core of, and in Holland was a country that prided itself, and before the war, of being so obedient. So the bureaucracy in Holland, when the Nazis invaded, and that was very different from Belgium, which had experienced the First World War, and that's why history is so important. But Holland was a very highly organized country, and the bureaucracy, when the Nazis invaded and the Germans occupied Holland, the Dutch bureaucracy followed the orders of the Germans, and they, made the lists available, and they did the work for the Germans, so the Germans didn't have to use their own people to govern the country. And so the Dutch bureaucracy, in blindly following the Nazi occupation, participated to some extent in the Holocaust, and it meant that Holland was the Western European country that lost over 70% of its Jews, because the bureaucracy collaborated and followed the leaders.
It is such a gift for me now to speak to young people. They will take from the story in order to become the kinds of people who will help make this a better world.
Those wonderful children, and my message to them is that my hope is in them, that every single one of them will develop and it needs to be that there needs to be a shared commitment to your own well-being as well as to the well-being of others, and that you've got to find a balance there, and that most of us, what horrifies me is the power of advertising, how people are so influenced by what the famous people and the movie stars, what they think and what they wear, the absolute nonsense in blindly following the ways of life of other people, that we have to be independent, self-sufficient, value ourselves, and value other people, and not be influenced by the propaganda and by all the advertising that is often so unbearably destructive.
Well, thank you very much for your thoughts, and I'd like to thank Yoav as well. And now we have an opportunity to see you as a movie star, and Yoav is one of the directors I admire.
Thank you.